Hi gang, it's Fiona and I am just editing the video and I thought I'd do a little explainer to let you know what we're up to. This has turned into a little three-part series and the first one, which was the last episode, was about leaving jobs. The next episode is going to be about starting jobs. This episode is a little bit of overspill from the last episode because it was getting quite long. And so it's a shorter one. And this one's about transitions, who stays, who goes, handing over jobs, coming back into jobs, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's the messy middle of handing over jobs. And then next episode, we'll talk about starting something afresh.
So it's a really, really weird transitional piece. And I can't imagine how difficult it is for colleagues who've had to put that information together when they're not leaving through their own choice. And that other colleagues, are in a position. I know some institutions and some friends of mine who've, applied for, say, voluntary severance, and the ones that are really good at their job have not been given it. And the more mediocre ones, or the not so well performing, have been let go with through voluntary severance. So they've got the package of money, they've got to leave. The other guys are left behind with 3 times the workload. So that's really, really difficult. And or if people aren't giving you a good handover and you think, well, why should I have to give them a good handover? So I think it's perhaps something a bit neglected. And it's silly, isn't it? Every time you get a new staff member in, every time you start a new job, everybody has to start from scratch. There's never much of a handover. Even the good handovers are a bit thin. And no one keeps it up to date. If you write a detailed handover, but they don't replace you for like 3 to 6 months, no one sodden keeps it up to date with what's happened in the interim. So the poor next person has to like knit it all together.
Well, I found that a bit when I went on maternity leave because I knew I was going to, I would be coming back, and somebody from my team stepped up into the maternity cover position. And it was weird going out of that role into maternity because I was acting above the grade, really. And the director and I had a really frank conversation about it. And, we both knew this was what was happening. We also both knew there wasn't scope in that role for a regrade, and had kind of made our peace with it. But it meant he had just given me free rein to do pretty much whatever I liked. I just got involved in all sorts of interesting stuff. But then having somebody step up into that role and trying to sort of pass out and be like, okay, this is really the core of the role. Here's all the other stuff that I do because it interests me and I like it and I find it kind of fun, but that you don't actually have to do in this role because everybody understands that you're acting up into this position. And like actually in some institutions, the grade not boundaries, but the sort of the width of the standard of work across a grade can be huge. So someone stepping up versus somebody stepping out can be really, really wide. And giving that handover was one of the most interesting experiences in really thinking, well, what actually is this job about? And then stepping back into it.
I was going to ask, what about
Yeah.
the other
So,
way?
like you had said, nobody kept any, he didn't keep any of the notes up to date or anything. So when I came back, it was like walking into a new job. Apart from all my senior colleagues were like, thank goodness you're back. We've saved all our hardest cases and most difficult challenges for you because we knew you were coming back. And so we just thought we'd wait until you got here. And I was like, thanks, gang. That was really nice of you to save all the horrible stuff for me.
I I've experienced that the other way around. So like I've been the junior staff member that stepped up into my manager's role when they went on maternity leave. And that what was so stepping up into the role was hugely intimidating because they were significantly more experienced than me. They had great respect of their senior leadership. I hadn't necessarily that long been in the role. I was like everyone else in the team who was my level had been in the role longer than I, knew more than I did. And also they didn't back I knew they wouldn't backfill my post. So I was essentially trying to do like 2 jobs badly once. It was very, very stressful. It was very, very difficult to keep up to that. But actually, the hardest part of it was handing it back. Um, it was a very, very stressful year of time, but I learned a phenomenal amount. And we went through some really significant changes, a big technical change and a big policy change. And the technical thing I sort of pretty much did single-handedly for a lack of budget and things like that, and got some really lovely recognition for that. And I was very mindful when my manager came back, they were coming back into a space where people were telling them, oh, Rachel's done a really fantastic job and everything. So that can be really, really uncomfortable, because we then had to re-find our working relationship again. I was the deputy. So we had to, she was incredibly understanding of the difficulties I found in letting go. We were both very considerate of each other, and we did communicate with each other about some of this awkwardness. But I was just like, if we hadn't had the good working relationship we'd had before, and weren't, quite those collaborative people, it must be so difficult sometimes to come back into someone who's usurped you, basically, and like built all these relationships with senior leaders and done all these things everyone thinks is wonderful, and then you'll come in and you're like, well, sorry mate, back in you back you go. So like handing over to them again was, because I had to do the handover essentially, because I was leaving the role of acting up, and but I was still there, and we still would do things that overlapped. And it was quite the negotiation to kind of find our way forward. So just like from the other side of what you're doing, because as you were telling the story, I was wondering where it was going to go, and the fact that they were really pleased to have you back, although that, I'm sure they saved all their messes for you, but on the other hand, it would have made you feel like really welcome and not surplus to requirements. Although in the very stressful year I'd had off, I had panic called her a few times, so she also did, she knew that she was helping through all the way. But I do think that that interim way, where it's definitely an interim type thing, and maternity and the fixed term is really difficult. And if you're already in the team, you have to think so carefully about like how much can you change, how much you have to think about your future relationship with the manager again. Yeah, interesting.
I think one of my most popular LinkedIn posts ever was my big rant about the 3-month notice period, though, and how ridiculous it is that we expect people to, firstly, that we expect people to hang around for that long, and secondly, that we can't seem to recruit quickly enough in HE. It's like, it's such a rare occurrence to have an actual handover with a replacement coming in to take over a role. Yeah, I don't really get it. Why is it so long, and yet why are we not able to make use of that long period of time?
Because I think it was originally through committee to recruit in, wasn't it? Like originally it was enough time 40 years ago to get a replacement, probably because they primarily would have come from an internal progression. It's based on probably a very old model. It may have worked back then. But despite technology, we can't recruit any faster. Crazy. Especially, I think it's very frustrating as well. When I have left roles and they've been put out to advert, no one ever asks me to look over the JD and to kind of advise if things have changed or make some recommendations about actually, the things on the person spec maybe don't quite fit with what you've got in the JD or what the role actually demands. Because it seems I'm like, I'm right here, use me. I was
I've actually been doing this job for the last 5 years. I can tell you what it really involves and what skills you actually need. No, we don't care about that expertise. Thanks, Rachel. Bye.
Yeah. You're leaving us. We don't want you anymore. Don't value your opinion anymore.
I think that's all we've got time for on this topic, but I think we should pick up in the next episode on the other side. So starting a new role, onboarding, coming back, and the whole set of challenges that go around that and how you can approach that.
Definitely. See you next time, guys.
Bye.